Hey y'all, welcome to Dungeons 101 with Erica. I'm going to go over 5 different dungeon etiquette tips. This video is intended to discuss the generally accepted behavior of dungeon queues. While some humor is intended, I hope that there are valid takeaways gained as well. First things first, you need a group to run a dungeon, right? How you obtain your group matters. There are many different types of players in the game. I'm going to address 4 main types in this video. The first type is in-game high DPS. These guys are top tier players. They've held world records in some sort of content at some time or another. They will run a debuff, but the whole queue must accept that it's only going to be a Mythlar, Old Black Dragon, or Frozen Journal. And if you ask them to run anything else, they're probably going to immediately leave the queue. They cannot afford to run any form of masterwork weapons, and they'll intentionally ignore wiping mechanics to do more damage. If they die, they die. At least they went out on top. Everyone else in the queue can only aspire to be as good as them someday. The second type of player is the in-game team player. These guys are good at their classes. They know what their powers do and when to utilize them. They're capable of running all or most content in the game. They'll usually have a variety of debuff artifacts and are willing to switch their active artifacts upon request. They'll also run masterwork and raptors for the group if asked. Team players are going to focus on mechanics and helping the group succeed as much as possible. These are my people. We like these people. The third type of player is the average Joe. These guys are not fully maxed out. They're still working on building up their gear and enchants. Some of them may still be learning and working towards mastering their classes. Others have a sound grasp on how their classes work. They're capable of completing item level appropriate content. However, some may need a little guidance to get through. Others may have taught themselves via YouTube and don't need any assistance. They'll usually have at least 2 debuff artifacts, of which one can be worked into the group composition. These are good people also. The last type of player that I'm going to discuss is the beginner. These guys are newbies. Debuff? What's a debuff? They're probably going to get lost in some large room somewhere. Encounters? Wait, I have more than just at-wills? Everyone start here. Beginners are vital to a game's growth and success. It is important to include these guys in content in order to help them grow and succeed. We like these guys too. Etiquette-wise, in terms of setting up or joining a queue, you should be able to read the queue, know the types of players that you can encounter in-game, and be prepared for the scenarios that each can bring. If you know that you're not likely to be patient in a queue of beginners or average Joes that may need some assistance, I would recommend setting up pre-made queues of your own for the daily pub queues. Definitely do not join zone chat callouts. If on the other hand you are fine with that, you can encounter all sorts of players via the pub queue and zone chat methods. Do not join queues and complain about the quality of the queue, especially if you did not take the effort to set it up yourself. The second etiquette tip is be prepared. When you join a queue, be ready to join the queue. Everyone has lives of their own, and not all people have all the free time in the world to spend playing. There are a lot of players that are only on for an hour or 2 each day, and they try to fit in as much as possible. If you know you have something that will cause the group to be sitting around waiting on you, let them know. It may be best if they pick up a different player due to time constraints. Everyone understands when something unplanned happens and you have to step away. Just be sure to communicate these things with your group. Do not join a public queue if you know you will be stepping away and just sitting at the campfire. Just decline the queue instance when it pops. Being prepared also encompasses entering the dungeon with any consumables that may be needed, such as health potions or life scrolls. Generally speaking, when a player dies, most will make an effort to pick them up, especially in random queues. However, this is not always guaranteed and may not always be an option in harder content or in the middle of boss fights. If you see that you're not going to be picked up, it's better to scroll rather than risking the team wiping due to your unpreparedness or unwillingness to do so. Number 3. Don't judge a book by its cover. This is specifically meant for public queues. When you queue into any content via public queue, try to avoid entering with any bias towards your group's capabilities. Don't immediately inspect players and form opinions of them based off of the gear they are wearing or the enchant quality on their back page. Again, in public queues, you have the potential of encountering all 4 types of players mentioned earlier: in-game high DPS, in-game team players, average Joes, and beginners. In addition to that, you have the potential to encounter all of these types of players' alt tunes as well. If you form bias towards your queue before you even start, you're setting yourself up for failure. If the players do not fit what is your ideal queue makeup, this doesn't mean the queue will fail. Always give the queue a shot. Abandoned instance should only be used if the instance is bugged or if the team comes to a general consensus after trying the content, and preferably trying the content again, that it will not be successful. No one likes loading into an abandoned instance of Demogorgon or Kaji because the group before simply loaded in, saw the hand they'd been dealt, and instantly abandoned. This will generally lead to a mass exodus from the queue and sets a precedence for that content being known as abandoned queue material. Vote to kick should only be used in a scenario where a player is being offensive or rude, or is AFK from the dungeon. You should never vote kick someone based off of their gear. On the same token, if you're not super experienced in the content, don't always assume your whole team isn't. There may be players within your team that are very experienced in the content, and most of those people are willing to help those that aren't. If you don't know the mechanics for a specific dungeon, don't be afraid to ask. Also, be sure to keep an eye on your in-game chat as well. Players will use this to help advise others in content in the event of mechanics that are not being played out properly. For those players that are offering advice, don't exclaim or demean. For new players, if you're unfamiliar with content, there are also battle tactics available in your journal that you can review for certain dungeon bosses. Number 4. Know your role. There are 3 distinct roles of a queue: tank, DPS, and healer. When you queue in a certain role, you're expected to perform that role. No one in the queue expects you to perform dual roles or solo the content. Tanks should lead the group and tank the majority of incoming damage. Healers should heal the tank and the group, and DPS should DPS and only DPS. If you're a DPS and do not have the patience to wait for the tank to lead and grab aggro, do not complain about there being a lack of heals or the tank not grabbing aggro. Allow the roles to function as intended. When Leroy Jenkins barbarian sprints into the mob and dies, this is not knowing your role, but barbs do what barbs do. Role-specific things to keep in mind: if you are the tank, pay attention to the speed your group is capable of moving at. Don't overwhelm your DPS with larger pulls than they can handle. Also, make sure your DPS are keeping pace with you. If you notice you're moving faster than the DPS and leaving them behind, slow down just a little bit. Don't ever be afraid to go mob to mob, or even pulling a little bit more extra mobs if you see your group is capable. If you are a healer, make sure you try to stay with your tank. They will take the most damage throughout the fight, and they'll need a little extra attention. However, don't take that as a cue to disregard the DPS entirely. These guys will need some healing love as well. Number 5. In-game chat etiquette. General etiquette is to be courteous and polite. No one likes a butthead. When typing to others or speaking to them, speak to them as you would want to be spoken to. Do not talk down to them or belittle them. Feel free to greet your group and encourage and thank your group for the time spent, even if it's nothing more than a simple GG's. Don't utilize in-game chat to taunt or brag on scoreboards. Avoid blaming others and pointing fingers, as well as being big enough to admit if you made a mistake. Most importantly, remember that this is just a game meant to be fun. Don't rob others of their fun or allow others to rob you of yours. If you encounter toxic situations in the game, de-escalate the situation or do not respond to them. If you feed the trolls, they keep trolling. Don't be afraid to block someone if necessary. Common sense will go a long way in dungeon etiquette. If you think you're being rude or question whether something you said or did was rude, it probably was. Just be nice to one another and help each other when you can. Everyone's end goal is the same. We all want the runs to be as successful as possible, and in the event of an unsuccessful run, try to leave better than when you entered. That's all I've got for y'all. Hope you guys all get some good loot, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye!